The room was too white, the kind of sterile white that only exists in hospitals and academic buildings. I sat upright in a cracked plastic chair waiting for the committee to finish skimming my proposal. Four professors, who all seemed to wear the same navy cardigan, watched me over the rims of coffee-stained mugs. The head of the film program, Professor Bauer, squinted, flipping through loose-leaf pages with fingers that always looked disappointed. "You're proposing," he enunciated each word as if picking crushed glass from his tongue, "a 2-hour documentary about the public housing community in Marzahn. What is your thesis here, Herr Becker?" I'd rehearsed this 1,000 times. That communities like Marzahn are more than the stereotypes suggest, that behind each panel block and graffited stairwell there are stories worth telling. I want to show their humanity. The room let that hang. Professor Kluger, my advisor, tusked, making a note I couldn't see. The pride I'd carried into the room was fraying with each passing second. Professor Bauer leaned back. "It lacks objectivity and, frankly, ambition. Why should your perspective matter? Where is the impact?" He pushed the packet back to the table's center as if it might soil him. I felt heat swelling in my chest, a familiar rage and something I despised even more, the urge to defend myself. I just nodded, jaw so tight I worried I'd crack a tooth. "But," I started, voice nearly steady. "You may pursue this," Professor Bauer cut in, ignoring me, "but it will not count as your capstone project. If you submit this, you will not graduate." The words struck dull, like a boot in mud, but their meaning was clear. Their decision was made before I ever walked in. My capacity for debate left me. I stood, gathered my papers, still meeting their eyes, my own gaze steady but bitter. Professor Kluger offered a smile, the kind that says, "I hope you'll be realistic one day." Down the hall, the click of my boots echoed hard and staccato. Outside, Berlin's morning sky hung low and grey. Trams rattled east down Warschauer Strasse. I tucked my scarf higher and called my mother, not expecting encouragement, only wanting to hear a voice that knew me. When she answered, her tone was bright but wary. "Michael, how did it go?" "They called it unserious." I found a bench in the wind shadow of the main building, eyeing a cluster of first years pretending to be busy. "They said I couldn't graduate with this project." On the other end, a long pause. I pictured her sitting at the kitchen table, cup of peppermint tea cooling in her hands. I had a feeling, main Schatz. Maybe this is a sign you should try something more practical, something with job security, or... "I'm staying with the film," I said, surprising both of us. Even as my pulse hammered with anger, I knew I couldn't go back, not after letting myself imagine something better. She sighed into the phone, resignation wrapped in love. "Please don't waste your energy chasing a dream that no one else sees." That cut deeper than any professor's dismissal. We said goodbye, words dry and perfunctory. I walked for hours. Kreuzberg's tobacco tang, Mitt's exhaust and fried onions, the U-Bahn tunnels full of the city's energy, all of it rolled through me like an electric current. I thought of the faded yellow blocks in Marzahn, the faces behind those windows, and the ache of stories unheard. Rage simmered, yes, but beneath it something else, the certainty that I would show them, I would outlast their disbelief. I didn't finish university. That year, I took a job stocking lettuce at Edeka to pay rent on a studio flat near Frankfurter Allee. Each evening, I rode the tram to Marzahn, camera slung beneath my coat, nose burning with cold as I climbed concrete steps. At first, residents eyed me with suspicion. "Media only come for misery," said Frau Jurek, who'd lived in 11B since the GDR days. "I'm not here for misery," I replied, filming as she scrubbed her kitchen tiles. "I'm here for the truth." Stories came slowly. Frau Jurek's tales of her late husband's chess club, teenage Noah's dances on the 8th-floor balcony, old man Zenka's hydroponic tomatoes on his windowsill. I filmed through winter, shivering in stairwells, riding up and down slow elevators that reeked of cigarettes and stale beer. Sometimes I returned home and cried from exhaustion and the weight of what I carried. At family gatherings, my little cousin's communion, Easter lunches, questions landed heavy across bratwurst and potato salad. "So, Michael," my Uncle Conrad would begin, a smirk chasing every vowel, "any progress on that, what do you call it? The Marzahn soap opera." "My aunts, you know Florian's son Jonas is a lawyer now, maybe you could." I learned not to answer, just to stare into my plate or excuse myself to the garden. My mother watched quietly, pride and worry at war in her eyes. She never mocked me, but her silences strung worst of all. After family meals, I'd catch her glancing at the family photos in the hallway, as if searching for a version of me she could understand. Those years blurred, money trickled in from terrible freelance gigs, editing wedding videos, recording children's puppet shows. My film grew slowly. When I wasn't working, I edited on a battered laptop at the neighborhood library, headphones clamped over my ears, splicing together lives almost no one cared about. Once I ran into Professor Kluger outside an art gallery in Prenzlauer Berg. She wore a scarf the color of spring leaves, face rounded with satisfaction I remembered from all-night critiques. "Michael Becker," she exclaimed, genuine surprise coloring her voice. "Are you still around?" "I'm working on the film," I replied simply, her head tilted, eyes kind but distant with pity. Still, a pause, as if deciding between encouragement and practicality. "There's a point where you have to ask if it's worth it, you know." I stepped into the soft, failing light and left her question unanswered. 3.5 years later, the film was done. It wasn't polished, the audio tinny in places, colors irregular and splices rough. Sometimes I could hear myself breathing behind the camera or cursing softly under my breath while the wind battered Marzahn's playgrounds. Still, it breathed and lived. I called it Zwischen den, the blocks. I didn't trust festivals, not at first. I uploaded it to Vimeo, emailed 100 links, most ignored me. Then unexpectedly, the Berlin Dokumentarfilmnacht invited me to screen it. I cycled through disbelief, joy, then terror. Still, I showed up, hands sweating, wearing the thrifted jacket my father hated. The screening room buzzed with 100 low-voiced conversations. Strangers trickled in, some residents of Marzahn whose faces I'd filmed, others curious, academics, young couples. When the lights dimmed and Frau Jurek's voice filled the darkness, I watched as shoulders relaxed in recognition, eyes watered and laughter broke out as old man Zenker described his tomatoes outliving every wife he ever had. After the credits rolled, there was a long, raw silence, then applause, longer than I'd imagined possible. People surrounded me, pressed hands to my shoulders, asked about my next project, volunteered their own stories. Reviews trickled in, then poured. One called it a masterclass in empathy. "Unflinching, intimate, necessary," wrote another. "Money didn't follow overnight, but emails did, editors, producers, even a Netflix scout." For the first time, I felt the world open wider rather than shrink around me. When the offers came, I packed my bags for projects in Rome, Athens, Istanbul, wherever stories simmered beneath the surface. My bank balance for the first time edged out of the red. I hired camera assistants, learned Hindi on YouTube, ate durian fruit in Jakarta for a segment on urban legends. But something kept tugging me home, not home to my family's apartment overlooking Spree Park, but to Marzahn, to Berlin's chill and its ferment of possibility. Still, I delayed returning. 6 years to the month after that committee room, I received an invitation. Zwischen den Blöcken would be screened at the university's new film series. They asked if I could attend a post-film discussion. I agreed, heart wild. The university looked smaller than I remembered, corridors shabbier, walls closing in around old ambition. In the lobby, the same professors gathered, older now, with silvering hair and more cautious smiles. Students milled about, clutching festival programs. My mother stood near the ficus tree, worrying a handkerchief. Professor Bauer greeted me, hands clasped tightly. "Mr. Becker, your work is everywhere now, I hear. We're proud to host you." His use of Mr. amused me, the first chink in his armor. I entered the auditorium with my head high. Midway down the aisle, I spotted my Uncle Conrad, his thick hands folded across his chest. My aunts, hair carefully curled, whispered to each other. Even Professor Kluger slid in beside them, lips pressed in a neutral line, betraying nothing. The screening began. I stood in the back, shadows flickering over my face as voices I loved filled the space. I watched as the audience's posture changed. Sometimes they leaned forward to catch every word, sometimes they laughed at lines I'd long forgotten. At one point, a scene unfolded of Frau Jurek explaining, with a gentle authority, how to scrub nicotine stains from winter windows. My mother, who had once doubted my persistence, who had watched me come home thin and anxious from years of struggle, wiped her cheek quietly. Applause at the end shook me. During the discussion, students asked technical questions, lenses, lighting, the ethics of immersion. An older man interrupted, voice raw. "It's the first time I saw someone make my childhood street look beautiful. Thank you." For a moment, I nearly broke, chin dimpling as I blinked hard against the sting in my eyes. After, people crowded close, pressing hands and programs for signatures. My family stood off to the side, uncertain. Finally, my uncle approached, dragging his words behind him. "That was impressive, Michael," he said, gaze fixed on the program in his hands. He spoke as if apologizing. I didn't know you couldn't capture it like that. Aunt Marga pressed her lips in thoughtful surprise. Maybe we were wrong, she admitted, to doubt you. I just nodded. In that moment, restraint was the only way to master the storm within me. Rage had carried me this far, but forgiveness, slow, earned, belonged now. Professor Bauer joined us. His voice was low, diplomatic. Your approach is precisely what we now teach, if you'd like to lecture or... Thank you, I replied evenly. I'll let you know. Later, my mother and I stood beneath the glass overhang while students and strangers filtered away, their laughter trailing into the night. She grasped my hand as she hadn't since childhood, her thumb tracing back and forth. I'm proud of you, she said simply, voice thick. Thank you, Mama, I replied, not because it was expected, but because it was real. We walked toward the U-Bahn together. Streetlights cast our twin shadows across the pavement, stretching ahead, a mother and son, both older now from struggle. Success hadn't made those years of isolation and fury vanish, but it did something gentler, alchemizing old wounds until they nestled beneath my skin, not as pain, but as proof of survival, of a story worth telling. In the end, I had returned, not looking for approval, no longer hungry for validation. I brought with me the streets and voices I'd gathered, all their small, shining moments laid bare before the skeptics. The proof stood in the light of that auditorium, undeniable. In their silence I found the homecoming I'd always imagined, not triumphant but deeply complete. And for the first time, the rage that had fueled me faded, leaving space for something richer, something that would last when the applause died. Peace.